The reading is taken from 1 Samuel chapter 1. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zophite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zoph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord. Her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?"
Once, when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk, and said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." "Not so, my lord," Hannah replied. "I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant to be a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." She said, "May your servant find favour in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast.
Early the next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." When her husband Elkanah went up with his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." "Do what seems best to you," her husband Elkanah told her. "Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word." So the woman stayed at home and nursed his son until she had weaned him.
After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And he worshipped the Lord there.
Amen. Thank you, Roger and Mary. Let's go to the Lord together in prayer. Almighty God, we worship you. Just as Samuel stood in your presence and worshipped you, so we stand in awe of you. You are the one who makes promises and the one who keeps his promise. You are good to your word. Your Son is the Word made flesh. And as we come to this new series, as we come to this passage, would you speak to us as deep calls to deep? In the name of Jesus, amen. Have you ever heard this proverb? Guard your heart because it's the wellspring of life. Some translations emphasize this greatly. They say, above all, guard your heart, as it's the wellspring of life. Or, guard your heart diligently, as it's the wellspring of life. And the idea is that you have this core. It's Proverbs 4, verse 23, if you wondered. It says you have this core, this absolute central part of you where your actions, your thoughts, your words come from. And you are to guard your heart above all things. Leb in Hebrew is the word, leb. And it has that to do with the central organ, the central part of your being, the core you. Now we start a new series today looking at the book of 1 Samuel. It's a gripping book, a riveting read. It's a story of 3 kings, Saul, David, and God. And we're going to look at the hearts of these men, of Samuel, of David, of Saul, and many others, Eli and his sons. We're going to be looking at their hearts. We've called this series Looking at the Heart. In 1 Samuel chapter 7, when David is called by God and anointed by Samuel, we're going to hear God's voice. And God is going to say, humanity looks at outward appearance. Humanity judges by what it sees. But I look on the heart. So that's what we're going to do in this series. Look at the heart. How's your heart today? How is the very core of your being today? In our house, we often have music either playing or someone, Joe or Mackenzie, playing music, the piano or the guitar. And every now and again, we have to have those instruments tuned because they're a little bit out of kilter. And that's how our hearts can get. In the very hot weather, Mackenzie's had to tune and then retune his guitar. There are times when he wants to play a certain song and he has to change the tuning of his guitar completely to get the sound that he wants. I wonder if our hearts aren't a bit like that. If there aren't occasions in our lives where we need to tune our hearts, and specifically tune our hearts to God's song, God's heart, God's character. So let's have a look at 1 Samuel chapter 1 this morning and look at wonderful Hannah. The story starts in a situation where there is favoritism and there is conflict, domestic conflict. We see this chap, Elkanah, And Elkanah has two wives. He has one wife who we're introduced to as Hannah. Hannah is an incredible name. She's an incredible woman, as we're going to see. But the name Hannah is an absolutely wonderful name. Have you ever heard these wine critics talk about a glass of wine? They'll smell it, they'll sip it, they'll slush it about, and then they'll spit it out. And they'll say things like, well, hints of oak, peppery aftertaste. I'm really feeling undercurrents of strawberries. You may have heard them speak like that. Well, the name Hannah is just like a fine wine. There are undercurrents, and there are accents, and there are hints of other flavors. In a nutshell, the word Hannah means grace. But Hannah is a blend of two words that come together beautifully to make her name. One of these words, Hannah, is about stooping kindly. Stooping kindly. It's how God treats us. He stoops kindly. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and he stoops kindly. And we're going to see that in this passage. There's another accent here in her name. Again, it sounds just like Hannah, and it has to do with slanting. Like a tent might slant, or the ropes of a tent might slant. So they would sometimes use this word to talk about setting up their tent. But primarily this word is about the sunbeams breaking through clouds and slanting down to earth. What an incredibly beautiful and rich name Hannah is. Primarily, it means grace. It means to stoop down kindly, just like Jesus, who left heaven and came and was like us, stooping down tenderly to meet with us. And it has to do with that joyous moment that the light breaks through a cloud and lights up earth. We're going to see all of that. So one of Elkanah's wives is Hannah. The other is Peninnah. And Peninnah straightforwardly means jewel. But there's a problem in this family. The problem being that there is, two wives, I suppose, to start with. But the deeper problem, this problem of two wives, is exacerbated by the fact that Elkanah prefers one of his wives. He prefers Hannah. And we're not going to have a lot of good to say about Peninnah, but I don't want to judge her too harshly. Because this lady knows that her husband prefers her rival. And this is going to spark a jealousy and a pain in her heart that is going to turn into a root of real bitterness and anger and mockery towards Hannah. Now, I don't want to treat her too harshly at all in that. The whole system here of having two wives is not a good one. We don't find it ever as a good news story in the Bible. It wasn't the way at the beginning. It was one man and one woman for life. But very sadly, Israel, the family of Abraham, were influenced by the cultures around them, and they took other wives. It never has a happy story in the Bible, not once. And here we enter into a domestic conflict. And in many ways, this domestic conflict between Elkanah and his wives is mirrored in the nation as a whole. We're told at the end of the book of Judges that everyone is doing right in their own eyes. It's a time where everybody is saying, if it feels good, just do it. If you're not harming anyone, and even if you are, just do it. It's a time when they are leaderless. It's a time when they are moving into godlessness. It's a heartbreaking time of conflict too. And so here are these two women. Hannah outwardly looks like she's got it all. She has a husband of social standing. And in verse 1 of chapter 1, we're given Elkanah's family tree. He is a man of history. He's a man of worth, of social standing. He's also a man of wealth. He can support 2 wives. He can go on frequent trips to Shiloh to worship. He can feed a rather large family and its retainers. He's a man of wealth. He's a man of genuine affection, it seems, to Hannah. We're told in verse 5, but to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, although the Lord had closed her womb. In verse 8, he says to her, Hannah, why do you weep and why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Although that's very clumsy and it's all about him, there seems to be an underlying deep affection and love towards Hannah. And he's a godly man. He is a man of faithful devotion who every year goes to Shiloh and worships, brings his sacrifice. So outwardly, it looks like Hannah is in a good place of security and wealth and honor. But inwardly, in Hannah's heart, there is deep pain. Firstly, she doesn't really have her husband. She merely shares him with Peninnah. And worse still, there is a deep heartache, a mourning of what isn't. She longs to have a family. Unimaginable heartache and pain. And yet, she's not alone. She's not alone in the Bible, and she's not alone among us. Unimaginable heartache. And although our circumstances may be different, many of us know deep pain, deep heartache. Now we know the end of the story, and so there is a glimmer of hope, but I don't want us to underplay in any way the bleakness in Hannah's heart or the bleakness in any of our hearts. But could it just be maybe a prelude to an amazing work of God, to a mighty work of God? It's going to be so in Hannah's life. I wonder if it could be so in ours. In 1989, after leaving school, I joined the Royal Air Force. Throughout my teenage years, all I wanted to be was a pilot. And at 17, I was accepted into the Air Force. And after finishing my A-levels, I joined the Air Force. The problem was I had asthma. I was in Grantham upon Spey in Scotland, and we were running around the hills and doing various exercises when I started falling further and further behind everybody else. I was struggling to breathe. I knew what was wrong, but they didn't. You see, I told a huge, whopping lie to get into the Air Force. I'd made a real omission in my medical history. I'm not proud of this at all. But I didn't mention that I had asthma. So desperate to be in the Air Force, I had built my life around it. I joined the Air Training Corps. I'd done my O-levels and A-levels with this in mind. Everything I did was designed for me to be a pilot in the Air Force, even to the extent of lying and not mentioning my asthma. Here in Scotland on a training exercise, I was struggling to breathe. I had no inhalers, I'd had nothing. And they were quite concerned, and I was taken to hospital. And of course, I was diagnosed with asthma. I had to go to the Central Medical Establishment in Google Street near Tottenham Court Road. And there I was put through my paces and given a tough physical examination. And at the end of that, they sat me down in a room and said, "We're very sorry, Mr. Caldwell, you have asthma. You're not fit enough to be in the Royal Air Force." I said, "I'll do anything. I don't have to be a pilot. I'll do absolutely anything." And they said, "We're very sorry. You're not even fit enough to be a bandsman. You don't have the puff for it." I was broken. I was devastated. A friend of mine, he's called Peter Johnston, he took me to church a few times, and I'd been going on and off for a number of years. It hadn't really hit home that there was a God who loved me, who saw me, who knew me. But I was interested. There was something in it. Well, after a particularly hard few months in which the girl that I was dating dumped me, and I was doubly brokenhearted, I went for a walk in the woods behind the house where me and my family were living. And in the woods, I was thinking about God. And I was thinking about this God that I'd heard about at church. This God who loves us and is for us. And I just couldn't see it in my own life. And I looked up at the treetops and I cried out, and I just stood there. Anyone looking at me would have thought I was completely mad. And I just shouted out at the treetops, "If you're a God of love, where are you?" I heard a voice. It wasn't a loud, booming voice, but it was a voice. And the voice said, "Look down." And so I did. And there between my feet was an acorn. And the voice said, "Pick it up." So I stooped down and I picked up the acorn. And the voice said to me, "So you have stooped down and picked up that acorn. So today I stoop down and pick you up. You are mine, and I'm going to cause you to grow." It's the most amazing moment of my life when I heard the voice of the living God, and he told me that I was his, and that he would hold me. My life, although at rock bottom, would be utterly transformed. I'd love to tell you that I've never hit rock bottom again, but I have many times. And each time, God, the God of grace, has stooped down and heard my cry and lifted me up out of a pit and given me a firm place to stand. Well, sometimes in our life, Our deepest moments of pain, our deepest moments of despair are the moments when we are most real with God. We're told in verse 6, Peninnah, her rival, used to provoke Hannah grievously to irritate her. Incredible language there. This word irritate, it's an onomatopoeic word. It's ram, literally. And it's roar, or it's the sound of thunder. And more often than not, it's used of thunder. It's thundering. Ram. And that's what we're told is happening. It's more than just a little bit of needling. It's a roaring of irritation, of provoking, of pain, of abuse, of being mocked, of being put on, of being put down. It is heartbreaking. And this drives her to her knees. Verse 7, so it went on year by year. As often as she went to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. There is every chance you felt like this. You felt so broken, you could not eat, you could not sleep, you couldn't get the thoughts out of your head. You believed the lies that are being spoken to you and at you, and you feel worthless and you feel hopeless. Verse 9, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. There are many ways to pray, and this is a good one: tears. David writes in Psalm 6, verse 8, the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. Did you know that? Did you know that the Lord hears the sound of your crying, your weeping, your sighing, your moaning? Is any one of you in trouble? Is any one of you suffering? Let them pray. And for Hannah here, her tears are doing the talking. Here's another psalm which is absolutely amazing. Psalm 56, verse 8. You have kept an account of my wandering. You've put my tears in your bottle. You have recorded them in your book. Not only does God hear the sound of our weeping, he records every tear. And every tear is utterly precious to him. So much so that they are recorded in his book. We can pour out all our griefs, our pain and perplexities at his feet. In fact, there's a story in the New Testament that shows us that we can actually soak his feet with our tears. Our Lord, King Jesus, is not embarrassed by our emotions. Our tears don't make him nervous. We don't need to apologize for how we feel. We just need to allow him in and bring our pain and our grief to him. We can unload all our distress at his feet. Are you crushed in spirit today? Is your heart breaking today? You can be like Hannah and pour it out to him. The incredible thing is that God hears her cry. And she said this, "O Lord of hosts." That's a lovely description of God as King of the angel armies and King of all the universe, the stars and the planets and every atom that's ever been made. O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. This is a beautiful prayer. She prays to this King of Kings, and she asks for a gift, but it's a gift that she's going to give right back to God. And like Samson, he'll be a Nazirite. He will have no haircut. He will have a lockdown haircut all the days of his life. He will never cut his hair as part of this oath to God to show that he is set apart and belongs to God. So she asks for something and she promises to give it straight back to him. The other thing that is remarkable about her prayer is that she believes this one, this God of every atom, this God of supernovas and stars, that this God will take note of a broken, insignificant woman living in the hill country of Ephraim. I find that astounding. She has incredible belief. You are the God who sees me, she is saying. You are the God who, although has created everything, is not too big to stoop down to me. These verses bring to mind Exodus chapter 3, verse 7, where God says to Moses from the burning bush, I have seen the affliction of my people Israel. And here, this God of nations, of worlds, of solar systems, here, Hannah cries out to him and says, for a little woman in a far-flung corner of the world, will you hear me? Will you see me? Will you answer me? And beautifully, he does. Her suffering, her pain was the prelude to a mighty work of God. Let's see what Hannah does next. Well, Hannah has her baby, and she is over the moon, and the year comes round again when they go and present their sacrifices to the Lord. Verse 21, the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. She made a vow, and she is going to keep it. I wonder if you have ever made a vow to God. Many people do. Lord, if you give me this, I'll do that. If you save me here, I'll always go to church. Or the beginning of a new year, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. Lord, I'm going to do this. I wonder if you've ever done that, but not fulfilled your vow. Breaks my heart that so many of us do that. We treat God and the things of God so lightly. But Hannah is wonderful. Hannah could have easily forgotten God. She got the baby, he would have become the apple of her eye, and all thoughts of her end of her prayer gone. But she didn't. She said, I'll wean him, and then he will stand in the very presence of God. This is the Old Testament. But there is something incredibly beautiful about her relationship with God. It is close and it is intimate. She believes he is the God who sees small little her. He is the God who will see little old Samuel. There's an intimacy and there's a beauty here. The writer to the Hebrews in the New Testament tells us that we can boldly go into the throne room of grace because of the blood of Jesus Christ shed on the cross. But here, by her faith in the awesomeness and the intimacy of God, Hannah goes to him. It's quite beautiful. So, what about us? What about our lives? Well, I suppose if Peninnah hadn't been so horrible, so goading, so roaring, so full of malice and mockery, Hannah might never have gone to the Lord in prayer. It's incredible that these hardest moments of our life are often the moments of our life where God really does do a mighty work. It's when we're in the deepest depths of the muddy mire that God comes to our rescue. It's when we're standing in the woods utterly alone and shouting out to him, if you are a God of love, where are you? It's when we're at the end of our rope. But so often, God comes close. Because of the goading, because of the mockery, because of this deep distress and desire for a baby, God is going to do an incredible work. God moves through our prayers and magnifies them. And in this instance, through the weakness of Hannah, he's going to bring forth a boy, Samuel, who's going to be a shield for the people of Israel. Let's pray. Father God, we want to bring our brokenness to you. Sometimes there are no words to say how broken, sad, and painful we find life. But you call us to come to you with our anguish and distress, our pain and our heartbreak. And right now, Lord, that is what we do. Believing that our pain may merely be the prelude to a mighty work of God. Amen.